I'm just remembering all of a sudden what it was like to be on the playground as a kid. And like there's, a swing set and like things to climb on and a field and like basketball court. And, I don't know, some of those seemed appealing to me as a kid, but some of them didn't. They sort of varied, right? And then there was also like you could make imaginary games with your friends. It's like, oh, we're knights, or oh, there's a dragon, or I don't know, we're shooting people or whatever, right? And I typically enjoyed those kinds of games more than the like, we're climbing on the thing, whatever. I mean, some of those were fun, but point being, there's sort of like in a way like limited physical options, and then outside of that, you were limited by your imagination, but also importantly, sort of the peers that you had, right? And a lot of my peers didn't want to play with me the way that I might have wanted to play with them, right? Like there was sort of a subset of kids that were down to play with the imagination and like, oh, now we're knights or dragons or whatever. And so it's like, okay, I know the two or three kids I could play in that way with, and then I'll go find them. But then there's this sense of like, there's more is possible. And so now as an adult, when I'm on the internet, I feel like I'm back on the playground, but there's so many peers and so many games and so many possible things I could do. It's like the opposite problem. There's like so much to do. And I'd rather have that problem than too little. And I think everyone on the internet is really trying to play one or more games that they're excited about, right? They're like, this is what I want to do, and then I want to do this with the people that I want to do it with. And I really like seeing what games I think people are playing, and then who I want to play with. And some games just don't vibe. There's over time I'm like, oh, your game, it's fine that you're playing that and I'm playing my game, but these just don't go together. And now we know. But it's really nice to discern, oh, there is someone who wants to play this like really weird, obscure game that I'm also interested in. And they're like the one person I've ever found that wants to play that particular game. And so I think that's sort of over time been the gestalt of what it means to hang out on the internet or to have conversations. And so conversation is kind of like the equivalent of the open field in the playground as a kid, where it's like you're just talking, right? It's just words, but so much is possible that you get to interact with someone on their own terms and as they are. And I really prefer this kind of a conversation, like one-on-one, because the two of you can co-create what game you're playing or how you see each other or how you interact with each other, and can kind of move fluidly between those things. So I think there was really, I mean, I could get into sort of the biographical specifics of it, but there was just really this desire to connect with a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. And so conversation is sort of the natural medium to at least begin that kind of connection and intimacy.
Totally. That's exactly what I'm looking for. And I'm thinking about where I'm at in my own game. And this is a new thing for at press time. This is a new thing that I'm doing. And I didn't expect it. I didn't see this coming. Like going on your podcast to talk to you was like a way of participating in a game that felt like it was ongoing. And I one thing I've loved about following it is the sequence of different people and topics that are on there, and sort of following your own sort of chain, like imagination train, like wherever it's going, and also sort of like how that combines with your physical movements and like what environments you're in, and sort of how those things contribute to each other. And your work on conversation, maybe obviously, maybe not obviously, is a huge influence on what I'm doing here too, because like talking one-on-one with people, the thing actually, I should just step back and say this. The thing I realized I wanted out of my online play that I wasn't getting was the opportunity to step back from the melee of posting with specific people in order to flesh out what I thought was going on between us in that game. Like, I'm definitely asking people to talk about things that I consider them experts on, but it's like in a lot of cases, not in every case, but in a lot of cases, I'm picking what we're going to talk about because it's the thing I want to hear about from them. Because it's the thing I'm like reply guying them about most of the time. So like, so I stepped back into this new medium, this maybe like more spatial dimensions kind of way of having the conversation. Definitely to like increase the play level in all of the ways that you're saying. But now all these new possibilities emerging out of what it is without my bidding. Like, you know, I mean, I guess it's just sort of a question of format. And I kind of want to, like, whatever my next question for you is going to be about format in some way. But the things that emerged from the questions about like how, when and how do I make this thing, and like what is the package, like it ended up being the game. It ended up being much of the game. And then like this weird idea of releasing multiple episodes at the same time, and then figuring out how they fit together, like that automatically followed from the idea of releasing episodes at the same time. Is like, how am I going to mix the topics together? How am I going to mix the personalities together? It's just like making games out of games out of games. And
yes,
one thing I love, I mean, like I think a lot about art and creativity in terms of media, and I know you do too. And I know you're talking about a new medium to start. I mean, it's not a new medium for you to experience, but you've been talking about making music, which is a very exciting thing for me to hear. And I think a lot about art and media in terms of how the format creates constraints. And it's kind of like the playground in the way that you're saying. It's like the structure is what it is. Do you, like, what kinds of constraints do you like on your unlimited playground of the internet in order to create the stuff that you create?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I think there are different values that I've come to have. Like, I love that you use the word melee to describe posting. It's like, oh, it can be like that. And for me, I don't want that. Like, I don't like that. I'm very conflict avoidant, perhaps by flaw and perhaps by greater virtue, who knows? Probably a mix of both,
Yeah.
if I'm honest with myself. But like, I'm, in a conversation, if you've reached melee like this, then you've kind of failed in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Like there can be disagreement or like nuance or tension or something, but if it's just like that's you've sort of failed. So I think that's certainly a constraint. Is I want to be connecting with people, and I want it to feel good, and I want to see them more, and I want them to see me more, and I want to be having fun. That's probably the most important constraint. Sure. Is just it really should be fun, and if it's not fun, then I want to do something different. And then I don't know, I think if I actually made a list recently of like the games that I think I'm playing on Twitter, and it's probably an incomplete list because I think there's more, but each of them has their own sort of rules or constraints. Like a simple one to say would be like, I like to post unusual, idiosyncratic meta phrases, that sort of resonate for me, right? Just like sharing what my experience of the heart practice is and the words that tend to resonate with me for other people. And like that has to be short, and it has to, like, I like to end it with a heart. I really like using heart emojis as punctuation. That's just like works for me. And that's simple constraints. And then each of the other games kind of has similar constraints or rules that's particular to them. I don't know, like another simple one would be I like to ask questions. And so that one should be clear, and it should make sense, but also be unusual and sort of unexpected. And yeah, I think each of the game has its own constraints, but in general, the general constraint is I want to be having fun, and I suppose underneath that, acting ethically according to my own values and the way of seeing myself in the world.
Mm-hmm. Questions are such a great. I mean, it's funny to think of that format as a constraint, because it's like actually the most open-ended thing you could do with words, right? Is like, what's going to happen? And so putting yourself in the situation where you can ask the question and get the answer is sort of the rest of the puzzle, right? And like asking questions on Twitter, sometimes even just in and of itself is considered to be engagement bait, right? Because people are just like given an opportunity. I mean, people take the opportunity to answer questions that aren't even being asked on there all the time. And so like when you do ask a question, you're going to get answers. And I find I find it to be so unlike asking a question of someone face to face, because you can take unlimited time to think about it, for one thing. Your answers are constrained by all kinds of physical constraints, for another thing. And that's sort of the thing that I think is terrifying about like real-time media experiences, and maybe even just like human interaction in general, is like, what happens next? What is supposed to happen next? And I think it takes more. I think it takes more spiritual practice than people are given credit for to be able to just sort of figure out how to do the next thing. I learn about presence from you every time I listen to you have a conversation, which is frequently, or whenever I have one with you, because I know you're practicing being present and listening and reflecting back and using all of these hard won sort of love skills to do it. I wonder whether talking to so many people in such an in-depth way has shown you anything about the range of places from which people are coming when it comes to that skill.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I feel very seen by that. Thank you. I am practicing that when I listen to people, and I think that's, sort of a unique value of the conversations that I have. It's both, it's intrinsic to the nature of listening, but it's something I really care about. So thank you. I think as far as range, I think what comes up more, I mean, people are better or worse at this in certain ways, but that's almost uninteresting to me. It's like, I know, I feel kind of disappointed when I notice that. So I try not to pay attention to that too much, because what I can control is how I pay attention to people, and, I always feel very grateful when someone has this skill as well. And usually it's their own flavor of it, right? I will say there is a real variety to the kind of flavor that people that are expert in it or skilled in it have, and that I always learn from those people, like, oh, how are they doing it? Because it's very different. And in fact, I think I'm still somewhat amateur in describing the flavors of that. So that's something I'll continue to think on. But what I can control is how I pay attention to people, and everyone is fascinating if you really attend to them and listen to them and bring that presence to them. And so, and what I find there is just the range of kinds of people there are. I always have this kind of like resistance to typologies of people, because it's like, there's so much variety. How could you possibly say there's even 20 kinds of people, let alone 8? And so I really value seeing the singularity of particular people and what's unique about them. And then with every conversation, it almost feels like I can see the world and what it means to be a human in a new way. And then that is refracted in every other conversation that I have, so that I start to be able to notice similar dimensions of experience in other conversations. And then that kind of creates a compounding effect where like I can see more and more the more conversations I have. So I'm kind of addicted to that, like seeing more and more about people. It's just like it gets better and better. So that's more of what I experience with range, is just the range of kinds of people there are generally. And then I don't know, I think there's probably like 10 or 20 people that I like really admire how they are present with other people. And it feels like typically, again, there's a unique flavor of that. And the way that someone has come to do that is very particular to them and their life experiences.
What about the part, I mean, so when I listen to or watch a conversation where that is being practiced, which happens all the time in like non-media spaces, just to be very clear.
Yes.
I find them inherently engaging to listen to. And so this isn't calling into question like what is interesting about listening to two people have a conversation, but I wonder what your sense afterwards is of listening to a conversation like that you had. Like what is the listening experience like? What is it that's engaging about listening to a conversation that was held with presence like that?
Yeah, what comes to mind is that there's a difference between valuing the substance of what was discussed, the sort of concepts and words and ideas that were generated. I often listen to my own podcasts again for that reason, to remember how someone spoke about something, or the words they used, or the ideas. That's very valuable. I would never want to disparage that. I mean, I think that's something that's well suited to having a transcript of, because it's like, oh, they described this in a really interesting way, or brought up this concept. It's like, yeah, that's well served by words. But on another level, again, what I'm attuning to is who someone is. Like, I think of my podcast first and foremost as trying to paint a portrait of who someone is through the medium of conversation. And then there are other things I'm also, similarly, there are other games I'm trying to play, but that's sort of the first game. I can't play the other games well unless I've played that game well. And so that level is something that defies a transcript, right? Like the tone of voice that someone uses, or this is why I like video so much, because you can see someone's facial expressions, or like how they attend to something. And so when I'm really interested on that level, it's interesting to go back and watch it, and listen to their voice, and also connect that with information that I have about who they are and how they show up in the world that might not be mentioned in the conversation, or often I have private conversations with these people as well, and I'm sort of cross-referencing those. And often, sometimes there's like a subtext to the conversation that's not explicit, and like cross-referencing that. And that's who someone's soul is. Words are thin at getting to that. They're not irrelevant, but who someone is in their essence or character or soul is so much more than any word they could ever use. And so that's often what I like to attune to. And I'd say lastly, there is also an experience of, in a way, the podcast that I have is an educational means for me. It's like how I'm learning from the world. And so I learn a lot about myself from listening to the conversations, and how I've changed and grown over time. And that feels precious. And there's an overall sense with any conversation that I have, whether it's recorded or not, on my podcast or not, just of how precious it is to actually connect to someone, actually speak to them. Like, I love words and putting eloquent words to describe things, and they just feel so inadequate to describe how precious truly encountering someone is.
Mm-hmm. Can you believe like how, like, where we've come to in all of this? Like, maybe yes. I don't know if I can personally. Just the level of depth and connection with so many people has so far surpassed anything I ever expected of the internet, that
Totally.
I feel it's just sort of like celebrating just by being here with you talking about it. What is your reflection on how far we've come?
I see how far we've come since I first started using the internet. There were sort of flickers of this kind of possibility in various communities I was in, and I think it sort of reached ahead over the last few years of both how much depth you can get into particular topics, but also this quality of really connecting with people as they are, as you are, playing the games you want to play. And then it makes me excited about the future. Like, so many people are excited about the future for, like, I don't know, like, wouldn't it be great if we had this technology or that technology? And I think that's cool, actually. I'm still a nerd at heart, but like, and kind of an optimist. Like, I don't want to, again, disparage that, but what really excites me is this going even more, where I could see what it might look like for us to look back 10 years from now, like, wow, we thought that was intimate. Like, intimacy just kept going, and also scale, even the number of people you can connect that intimately with. So I feel excited about that. And yes, also very, very grateful